Baci Sospesi, un progetto di Barbara Sbrocca.
I am very comfortable here, so you can ask me anything you want because I don't have secrets. Sometimes when you look back, you know it was a pivotal moment or it was a very important time. And yet for other people, it doesn't sound like it. And that's logical, of course, because it's your pivotal moment, not somebody else's. I think pivotal moment for me was when we realized that my husband had only 4 weeks to live. And we realized that we could use the time in several ways. We could sit there and whine and, mourn, etc. Or we could use that time to finish what we had started 36 years ago. And so it was full of pivotal moments. Because it was, for instance, my husband has always been an avoider of problems. And he died on Saturday, and on Tuesday, he said something, and if you would kill me, I wouldn't know what he said. I do know that at that point I said, "You fucking gotta be kidding me. You're dead next week, and what you're saying right now is so terrible, and I'm not going to sit with it. You are going to clean it up right now." And he looked at me very sheepishly and said, "I thought by now I could get away with it." And I said, "No, you won't be able to get away with it. We are going to finish this relationship the way we started it, and we're going to be honest with each other. So do not think you're going to get away just because you're dead next week. I mean, come on." I could have let it slide with the idea of, well, he's going to be dead next week. Or I could have said, "Excuse me, this is not how I want this relationship to end," with a lie or with something that's unresolved between the two of us. So that was a moment that if you want to get out of that relationship what you still need, you better do it now. When you know you've got 4 weeks, my husband was not afraid of death. I remember somebody from our publishing house, because we've both written books, came and said, "Well, perhaps a miracle happens and you live." And my husband looked at him. He says, "And perhaps a miracle happens and I die." It was not something for him to get scared of, or to, he would have liked to live a little bit longer. That's a different thing. But, the fact that he was dying didn't bother him to the extent that he was afraid of it. I was, 17 or 18. When I met him, we had big conversations about everything and anything. And one of the first things I can remember, he mentioned reincarnation. And I don't know why. I listened to it and I go, "Oh, that's right." I never heard the term before. And he explained what it was, and I thought, that's right for me. So from the moment that we met, we had big conversations and debates, and We didn't immediately get into a relationship because at that time, we debated a lot and stuff like that. So we didn't know in January of the year that he died, that he was going to die, but I was finishing a book, and we always had to go to the United States because our daughter lives in the United States. While I was in America, he wrote me a letter about what he remembered about our first meeting. And that was very interesting to me because he was revealing things I never known about him. I realized at that point, after 36 years, that I kind of was like an eye-opener for him because he came from a very conservative family. And here he said, it was like all of a sudden I saw all the possibilities that were available to me by just looking at how open you were and how alive and how, and he said, and all of a sudden I realized that I could be part of that openness, of that, that was kind of interesting because in 36 years, I'd always thought, because I'm kind of a free spirit to a certain extent, and also because, of course, being a Holocaust survivor, I am not completely attached to things, materialistic things, because in those 2.5 years, I just was traveling with my little suitcase with my pajamas in it, and that was okay. And I still have this mentality that anything that is really important to me fits in a little suitcase. So, and the rest is superfluous. So I never realized that for Dick, that basically that I was something he had never experienced and was something he wanted for himself, that enjoying life, because he thought he was boring and he thought that life wasn't to be enjoyed, it was just to work. And here he saw this woman and she was working, but she seemed to enjoy what she was doing. And it seemed to be eye-opening to him, and it was very interesting because that what he described was like, about a month after we met. I never knew that he obviously experienced me totally different than I thought he did. There were a couple of other things that he wrote that had to do with, like what we were going through at that time or what he wanted from me. And it's very funny because then after he died, that was one of the things that was very interesting to reread. But I think that, and then I reread it because of course he's been dead for 26 years now. And then every time you reread it, you find other things in it because of the fact that that's just how it happens in life. I'm part of the human library. And people ask me that. And they say, can you still trust people when people have done those terrible things? And I can't help it, but I say, but I'm alive because of the good things people did. They found a new place for me every time, 16 times. And so I have this, I don't know how I can say it. I have this absolute knowledge that there are very many people good in this world, and that I might as well look for the good people because the bad people are there. I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm not thinking that the world is good. No, not at all. But I think trust is a subjective thing. I believe that we all have the goodness. And what do I appeal to when I talk to you? Do I appeal to your goodness or do I appeal to your evilness? I had to learn, though, to get involved because when I was in families, those 16 families that I was in during the Holocaust, it's like, think about it, if you have somebody that asks you to take care of their kid for a couple of weeks because they're going to go on vacation, you give them a bed and you give them food. You don't raise them. I was never raised. I was always on the periphery of the family. And so I had to learn to get involved, to stay, because my natural habitat was periphery. I always was looking from the outside in. And I had to learn to be vulnerable and be part of it. Because when you're at the periphery, you can always keep your emotions out of it. So I had to learn to become involved and to make myself vulnerable to the opinions and thoughts of other people. At a certain point, I decided that I needed to get in therapy because I did not know until I was 17 I was Jewish. Because the war never happened in my family. They didn't talk about it. It was not an issue. And we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about being Jewish because if there was another war and they knew you were Jewish, you would be the first one to be picked up. So you don't talk about being Jewish. So at a point that I found out that I was Jewish, it was more a process for me putting the things together. What does that mean? What does being a Holocaust survivor say about me? What does that mean? The phobias that I have, do they have anything to do with that? I thought everybody had phobia, so I wasn't too afraid of it. But I mean, then I thought, might that have something to do with what I experienced? And so I went into therapy because, like it was affecting my child. He had problems. We took him to a psychologist. Psychologist said, I want to talk to you. And I said, how come it's always the woman's fault? Come on. And he said, oh, wait a minute. Aren't you the one that was in hiding? And I said, yeah. What's that got to do with it? He says, well, don't you think it's interesting that your son is having problems starting at the same age when you went into hiding? Don't you think there might be a correlation? I said, I never thought about that. And when he said that, I kind of like went, okay. So I think that as far as trust with people, I had to learn to be vulnerable because that also has to do with trusting. Trusting that when people do hurt you, that you have the strength to learn from why it hurt and to do something with it for the good of yourself. One of the things that I say when I introduce being a Holocaust survivor in the Human Library, because people, when they hear I was transferred 16 times, their first reaction is, oh, you're that poor kid. And I tell them, well, wait a second. What I gained from it, I became extremely flexible. I had to. Every time I was put in a different situation, even though I was only small kids do that quite well. And I learned how to be extremely flexible. I said, second of all, I learned that after a couple of times being moved, that the only person I would know in the next place would be me. And I became extremely self-sufficient. And on top of that, I learned how to read emotions. Because people were always emotional around me, because if they would be caught with a Jewish child, they could go to the concentration camps. They were always paranoid around me. But if they became more paranoid, more than normal, I knew that the resistance would come pretty fast to pick me up again. So I learned how to read emotions. So I think that for me, nothing happens to me again without me being able to learn from it.
Baci Sospesi, un progetto di Barbara Sbrocca.